On this edition of the program, you might have heard of the term military-industrial complex. You might have heard that it's the reason why we keep going to wars, why America is in debt. But what if that were wrong? What if the military-industrial complex didn't exist at all? Ryan McBeth joins the show to talk about that, and we get a little bit into Gaza. It's all coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for June 7th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas. We got a great conversation. I'm not going to do a big intro for it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the one and only Ryan McBeth. Joining me now on the program is one of our favorite newer recurring guests to the program, the one, the only Ryan McBeth, an open source signals analyst and the host of his very popular YouTube and Substack. Welcome back to the program, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Justin. I really appreciate it. Do you mind if I smoke? Is that okay with you?
Please, go ahead.
Outstanding.
Mi casa, su casa. I don't think that there's any kind of deposit on this Riverside room, so we can do what we want. I wanted to hit you up because you put out a video that I thought was very, very interesting and thought-provoking when it comes to the idea of the military-industrial complex. It is something that is discussed a lot, and you came to it from a counterintuitive take, somebody who has been in the military, still works around the apparatus, that what we think of as the Eisenhower idea of the military-industrial complex not only is not in existence anymore, but hasn't been in existence for nearly 30 years. Please summarize your argument.
Absolutely. So essentially, when Eisenhower was running the show, what he saw was all of these defense companies that also had their hands in some civilian technologies. For example, Motorola built radios. RCA built radar. When you think of RCA today, if you still remember it, you think of like, RCA Records, RCA Victor Records. I think RCA is still around for records. A lot of people have RCA.
I think it's a label, yeah.
Yeah, RCA had televisions. RCA built televisions. But they also built radar for like the Aegis combat system. Now, when Eisenhower was in charge of things back then, we had thousands, I think it was 24,000 nuclear weapons ready to go. And the Soviets may have had 2,700 nuclear weapons. So at that time, I think we were spending about 9% of our economy was geared towards the maintaining our military. And back then, if you had an idea of like, hey, we can deliver a nuclear weapon via a dolphin, and to get it up on land, we're going to give the dolphin legs and a mech suit. They would have said yes back in 1990 or back in 1961, because we were thinking of all sorts of wacky ways of delivering nuclear weapons. We had weapons like the Davy Crockett, which was essentially a nuclear recoilless rifle. So you were fine. Did you ever play the game Fallout? You know, you have the Fat Man.
No, but I am familiar. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm not much of a game player either, but the Fallout is kind of based on the Davy Crockett. We had weapons like the Lance missile and the Honest John, which were nuclear-capable missiles that were at the brigade level with this thing called the Pentomic Army. So everything was kind of focused around nuclear weapons and growing our military to defeat the Soviets on a nuclear battlefield. And around 1991, something kind of funny happened. We essentially won the Cold War. Russia failed as a nation, and we went through a phase called BRAC, or the Base Realignment and Closure. And base realignment and closure started shutting down bases in 1998, 1991, 1993, 1995, and 2005. And actually, in a way, they cut too much, because now we essentially only have 2 shipyards. And that's kind of an issue, right? Essentially only having 2 shipyards. So with the BRAC closings in February of 1993, all the top 15 defense contractors were called to the Pentagon for a meeting with Les Aspin, who was the...
Well, hold on, but before we get to that, I do want to... When I was watching your video, there was this kind of very visceral memory that popped back from my childhood. Speaking of the early 90s, I remember that being the first time I could remember the idea of military spending and it being gaudy or overblown. And I specifically remember like the $500 toilet seat or the $1,000 hammer being an idea of military over expenditure or the budget being run amok. Yeah. Is this part of that sea change, this post Soviet Union fall sea change for BRAC, or is that just the general tide of politics and culture taking a re-examined look at military budgets?
That's a good question. And a lot of the changes when it came to specifications, like why does a hammer cost $400 or a toilet seat? And I can actually explain why if you'd like to know why.
Please,
not necessarily grift. So let's say you design a toilet seat for a U.S. Air Force plane, right? Mm-hmm. Now that toilet seat needs to be able to work in Antarctica, and it has to be able to work properly in the desert of Saudi Arabia. So they have to test that toilet seat. Can you decontaminate that toilet seat in a chemical environment? Or will the chemicals seep into that toilet seat? Same thing with the hammer,
Gotcha.
That $400 hammer. So one of the things that you saw with Al Gore and President Clinton was this idea called reinventing government. I think Al Gore went on David Letterman and read the specifications for an ashtray for the U.S. government. And that's why the ashtray, if dropped, needs to break into not more than 13 pieces. And he's laughing as he's reading this criteria for an ashtray. So I think as we've kind of moved more toward COTS or commercial off-the-shelf products, we've kind of gotten away from some of the specifications for military equipment that make military equipment so darn expensive. It turns a hammer into a $400 hammer. Because now you go, all right, let's put this thing inside the cold environment and try to smash it and see if it breaks. What is Army, I've heard the term Army strong, right? Oh, this is military specification, right? Well, a lot of people say, oh, military specification just means, it's the lowest bidder. No, it's the lowest bidder that can meet the terms of the contract.
Yeah.
So if the lowest bidder says, well, this hammer is guaranteed to operate negative 20 Celsius and up to 100 Celsius, that's actually pretty darn hot. I don't know if anything can operate 100 Celsius, but you know, hot, 50 Celsius.
Yes.
It's probably a little better, right? So that's why equipment, becomes so bloated because you add.
But that is not specific to that. That probably has more to do with the Clinton era, the era of big government,
reinventing government,
kind of. That was that. Brax is its own thing, specifically in terms of the top line actual way that the military was structured, and therefore those that feed into it, the companies that feed into it, their capacity to do so.
That's correct. And with BRAC, you had all these bases closing. We went from 28 Army divisions down to 10, the active duty Army. If we're talking about the National Guard, we went down to 18, including National Guard. We had 191 fighter squadrons throughout the entire Air Force. And Air National Guard and Reserves. Now we're down to 81 throughout all of the components. The Navy went from 546 ships down to 239 ships today. So we went through this massive restructuring, this massive closing. And anybody who was in during the Gulf War, and I got in right after the Gulf War, I certainly remember people not necessarily getting laid off, but taking early retirement, getting removed from service, volunteering to leave. Just because we needed a smaller army. We had no one left to fight. Mm-hmm. And 1993, in February, all of the defense contractors, the top 15 companies, were invited to the Pentagon. Les Aspin held this meeting and said, you guys need to start consolidating because we can only afford like 5 of you. And essentially the military-industrial complex as we knew it died that day.
That day.
I think it was December 20th.
What Eisenhower was talking about, specifically the idea of a permanent class of private public companies that would only get fatter because of military expenditure, that is done the way Ike knew it in the 90s.
That's correct. You're absolutely correct. And you could say even it was dying. As our tech sector increased, and when you look at companies now, a lot of times, General Electric, they made aircraft engines. I think they still do. they also make consumer electronics. One of the things Jack Welch did was he rolled into GE and said, hold up, we're making medical devices, we're making jet engines, we're making dishwashers. Now, whether Jack Welch is a good CEO, that could be its own show. That could be the whole thing, right? Just what Jack Welch did. But when you look at it, a lot of companies are like GE. They had a defense sector.
Yeah.
And, Grumman, I think one of the products Grumman also made were canoes. So what did they bend? They bent aircraft aluminum, right? So why not make aluminum canoes?
Why not make a canoe? Sure, yeah. If we already got the lines running, then we'll do it for something else. So what happens then, and you spell this out more specifically, I would highly recommend everybody watch the video of the actual pathway for who eats who, but we essentially settle down into the situation that we have now, where you have Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, Boeing. Am I missing anybody else? Any of the major
Northrop
players?
Grumman, Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, and I'm sorry?
No, I said Raytheon. I was just echoing, what you had just said.
Yes.
So
I'm sorry. So it's Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman. Those are the
General Dynamics. There we go. So that's who survives. They eat various pieces or wholes of the other folks that got called into that meeting. And you do a good job of showing the math that if what we are to believe is the military-industrial complex is going to be a gigantic moneymaker, not only has it not made the kind of money that you would expect a war machine producing sector would do, especially by Eisenhower's thoughts, but it's also dwarfed by most of the other sectors that we would imagine in American life.
Absolutely. If you take the top 5 defense companies, you would the kind of the thing, and the name for it is called the AJAC community: activists, journalists, academic conspiracy theorists, academics and conspiracy theorists. It's called the AJAC community. Activist, journalist, academic.
Is that your name, or is that an official name for this?
It's my name for it, but people started using that name just like DIP or deceptive imagery persuasion. But the AJAC community. I mean, look, you have to give it an acronym. And so
I love it. I love it. So, I actually just love putting those people together, because it is like essentially just people who get traction on social media for whatever reason.
Yeah, and the for those people, for the AJAC community, they need to believe in a boogeyman. It's part of their core beliefs. And you wouldn't necessarily put those people together. You have activists, you have journalists, and in some cases journalist activists. You have academics who've never actually run a business, and you have conspiracy theorists. And they all kind of work together when it comes to making the military-industrial complex as this boogeyman. When if they would only crack an annual report, they would see that the top 5 defense contractors only made $13.2 billion in revenue last year, whereas a company like Procter & Gamble, which is a consumer products company, I think they made about $14 billion. I'm doing this off the top of my head. $14 billion last year. So which business would you rather be in, F-35s or diapers?
Yeah, one makes a lot more money. Now you would make the argument that if you're not Procter and Gamble, the community for which feeds into government and into military is one that turns over at far less of a rapid rate than the consumer product market. You can be high on the hog one year and gone the next year in consumer products. It takes a little bit longer for government contractors to be out of that position.
Yes and no. I mean, look at, do you remember the movie Falling Down?
Yes.
With, all right. So remember, the main character of Falling Down, what was he? He was a laid off defense worker.
Yeah.
In fact, you're into politics. Why did California turn blue? Turn blue, right? Yeah. Why did California turn blue? Because of BRAC. Because of BRAC. Because we started shutting Fort Ord in California. That was one of the bases that was shut down. We shut down multiple bases in California. It killed the defense sector in California. And all those jobs moved away. People who work in defense tend to be conservative. It's not necessarily always the case, but that tends to be the case. And that was if Brack had never come along, the movie Falling Down could never have been made.
That's very interesting. This is your update, brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. If you want to support this show, that's the only place that you head. Get 2 bonus podcasts each and every week. Let's get into some of the stories that we didn't get a chance to cover on this episode. Amid a legal battle to avoid a U.S. ban, potential buyers for TikTok are emerging. Steve Mnuchin, former Treasury Secretary, and Canadian businessman Kevin O'Leary have shown interest, but a new suitor has emerged. Frank McCourt, former owner of the LA Dodgers. McCourt, who's a critic of big tech, aims to transform TikTok through his Project Liberty, which promotes a decentralized internet. He hosted an event highlighting support from parents affected by social media harms. Unlike other bidders, McCourt doesn't seek TikTok's algorithm, but wants to integrate its user base into Project Liberty's protocol. He believes this decentralized platform will attract users by offering control over their data. McCourt is in discussions with financial advisors, government officials, and potential supporters, confident that people will prefer a platform providing more voice, choice, and economic state. Doesn't matter what they think. Matters what ByteDance thinks, and ByteDance is not going to sell to anybody that's going to do something like that. If they sold to anybody, it would be another kind of partnership that would essentially allow them to retain some kind of stake, which would probably mean some kind of institutional investor, which would definitely not be Frank McCourt. So while there might be a lot of back and forth on TikTok sale, don't count on this one. There is some news on TikTok that is interesting, including the fact that it's apparently a MAGA hive. Joe Biden launched his TikTok account a couple months ago. It currently sits somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000 subscribers. Meanwhile, Donald Trump just launched his over the last weekend, and as I speak to you, it is between 5 and 6 million subscribers. That's a big jump. I'd say that it's consistent with some of the stuff that we get on this channel. Whenever I post clips on TikTok, it's usually about 5-1 in terms of Trump. So the thoughts that Gen Z is more Trump curious seems to be the case. A federal judge has ordered Steve Bannon, a former advisor to President Trump, to begin his 4-month prison sentence on July 1st. This follows the rejection of his contempt of Congress conviction appeal by a 3-judge panel. Bannon was convicted in 2022 for not appearing for a deposition and refusing to turn over documents subpoenaed by the House. That was, of course, the January 6th committee that was conducting that. Despite Bannon's intent to appeal to the Supreme Court, U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols, a Trump appointee, sided with prosecutors, dismissing Bannon's argument for remaining free during the appeal process. Bannon's attorney, David Schoen, argued that there was no immediate basis for incarceration, but Nichols disagreed. Bannon, silent during the proceedings, was convicted alongside another individual for defying the Jan 6 committee orders. Oh boy. Well, Bannon obviously is somebody who wants to make this as loud as possible. He is a political actor. I think that is safe to say by anybody who would look at the process. Does he deserve to go to jail for 4 months for defying Congress? I am not a legal scholar, so I cannot say legally whether or not there is a mechanism in place to put him where he will be on July 1st. I do know that a lot of people don't heed Congress, and I would hazard a guess that it was Bannon's behavior during, before, and after this whole process that has earned him his stint in the clink. But still, it's going to continue and further some of the narrative around the idea that the Justice Department has been weaponized against Republicans and MAGA specifically. And you don't have to take my word for it. Literally listen to Steve Bannon up until during, and then probably after when he gets out of jail. Finally, President Biden told ABC News' Dave Muir he will not pardon his son Hunter if convicted on 3 felony gun charges, which could result in up to 25 years in prison. During the interview held in Normandy for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, Biden expressed his intention to accept the trial's outcome. Despite his quote-unquote boundless love for Hunter, Biden affirmed his stance against a pardon. The trial has been challenging for the Biden family, with members testifying on both sides. Prosecutors allege Hunter made false statements when buying a gun in 2018 and possessed the gun while using narcotics. He has pled not guilty. This despite the fact that he wrote about doing narcotics in his own. I don't know how this trial is going to play out either. I will say it has been salacious. The widow of Joe Biden's deceased son, Beau Biden, who then went on to have a romantic relationship with Hunter, testified today, Thursday, as I am recording this, that she smoked ping pong sized balls of crack with Hunter the day before. A ex-girlfriend of Hunter's, a 24-year-old stripper, said that she met the president's son after he came into her club, requested 2 girls in the VIP room, and then played the indie band Fleet Foxes while smoking crack. Obviously, very salacious kind of stuff. Joe Biden, here in this election, saying that he will not pardon Hunter Biden. He's very committed to creating combating the narrative of the Trump campaign that there is a weaponized DOJ. How can there be a weaponized DOJ when he won't even pardon his son? That being said, if he loses, I think Hunter's getting pardoned. If Hunter's convicted and Joe Biden loses, I think Hunter's probably getting pardoned. It's just me. That's just me. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go to get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. We had a great couple episodes, not only a big Sunday episode where all the Sunday shows, we had a good look at some of the campaign strategies, both on the Trump side and on the Biden side, as resulting to the Trump convictions. And on Thursday, if you like some of the salacious Hunter stuff, we got a lot more of that, as well as a look into the Israeli peace process, which is just a mess, as you might imagine. Hamas rejecting the latest Biden peace plan, and a rhyming cowboy. Because, politics. Head on over there. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go. $3 level gets you 2 bonus episodes each and every week. 4 episodes of this show each and every week for only the price of a cup of coffee. And now, back to Ryan. Well, let me give you my thought, because this is immediately where I come to it from the political side of it. And I would say that the military-industrial complex is something that I believe is right now at a rising, it's having a moment right now, or has over the last 5 years or so. And I'd be curious to actually see the Google Trends on it, because I wonder if it has actually risen more than it was 10 years ago. And here's the reason why. The Iraq War. From my point of view, politically, the Iraq War was, the 2004 Iraq War, was the breaking point on the left for the idea of foreign interventionism. Afghanistan less so. Iraq was the breaking point. And up until 2016, that had kind of been specific to the left. Donald Trump changes that and brings a populist element to the right, for which the concept of we need to be suspicious about foreign interventionism becomes very mainstream. There are very passionate strains in both sides of our major parties that very much believe this. And you've seen it more specifically on the right now when it comes to Ukraine aid, when it comes to Israeli aid, and when it comes to a smaller extent, Taiwan, where the question is, where is this money coming from? What is it going to? And why do we need to do it when, insert your pet reason why we should be spending that amount of money here at home? There is a more domestic focus on that. And the answer to that very often, especially as you point out, if you want to seem like an intellectual by saying 3 words, you could just conspiratorially say the military-industrial complex, and then
That's
mention
what the
Dwight
AJAC
Eisenhower.
community does. That's what they do. They go, well, it's the military-industrial. Don't you see? Don't you?
Now,
are you blind? It's the military-industrial complex. They're making this happen.
And that's the thing, is that while I do think that there is a lot of well-studied and intellectual conversation that we can have in skepticism of everything that I just mentioned before, the concept of Boeing's got to sell bombs, so we have to destabilize another country around the world so we can create a situation to sell bombs is convenient, intellectually convenient. But I do think that that's the reason why, politically, that we have seen it talked about more than we have otherwise. Well,
it's also part of a Russian narrative, and it has to be. So I think one of the reasons that it comes up more, and this was one of my problems with Annie Jacobson and her nuclear war book, and she kind of falls into that AJAC community of, I would say, activist journalists, where I am deathly afraid that the book she wrote about nuclear war, which is not a very scientific book, but it's a very emotional book.
Can you lay out the concept of that book for the audience that is not aware of it?
Annie Jacobson is a writer. She's written a couple of books about tangentially military policy and some military operations. And she wrote a book about nuclear war, which is kind of like a hybrid fiction nonfiction book that did a hypothetical attack from North Korea onto the U.S. The U.S. Responds to that attack from North Korea, launches multiple weapons. Russia sees those weapons, launches their weapons thinking they're under attack. And it's a book that I call the idiot plot. Roger Ebert actually came up with that term. Everyone has to be an idiot for the plot to work. And in reality, if North Korea launched a nuclear weapon at us and it was headed toward Washington, let it explode. Who knows? Maybe it's a conventional weapon. Maybe it's a chemical weapon. We can get another Washington. But it's not going to destroy or counterstrike. And if we did retaliate against North Korea, we would have used submarine-launched ballistic missiles from the Pacific Ocean, which wouldn't overfly Russia. So again, this is one of those idiot plots. But essentially, she wrote this book, and it scared people. And she went on every single podcast, I think except yours. And every single podcast except yours, where she terrified everybody. And then I had to come around with like a broom and a dustpan and go, whoa, okay, guys, let's talk about what radiation actually is before we start spouting on about radiation. I don't know how I got onto that topic, but
you were talking about a narrative that was apparently exacerbated by this book.
Yeah, so one of the narratives that Russia is pushing right now is that what if Russia goes nuclear, right? Yeah, that's their big thing. What if Russia goes nuclear? And that's something that's come out
of Putin's mouth, right?
Yeah. What if Russia goes?
That he's testing whatever, or like it's not off the table.
Go test it. Yeah. We need data too. So, look, when people say, what if Russia goes nuclear? That is Russia trying to scaremonger people into not standing up to them. And the next thing they say is, you are only going to war because you're a warmonger and you work for the military-industrial complex, which doesn't really exist. So they need you to believe these two things simultaneously, that there is a military-industrial complex pushing you to war, and that if there is a war, there will be nuclear weapons used in that war. You need to believe this narrative because they do not want to have to stand up to the West. And if we can get enough people into thinking, if we fight Russia, there will be a nuclear war, then we will stop aiding Ukraine, we will let Ukraine fall, and then probably in about 10 years, Russia takes the Baltics, Russia takes Poland, and we're fighting Russia anyway. We're in World War III right now, whether you like it or not. We've been fighting it since... respectably 2022, we've been in World War III, and you could even go back to 2016. We've been fighting Russia.
Russia being the chief antagonist to the United States.
If you imagine a chart, this is a chart that I show a lot, where we fought on land ever since the first sword and the first spear, right? Ever since Stag said, I don't like the way Ragnar looks at me, and stabs him with that spear. And we've been fighting on the sea since like the Peloponnesian War, and we've been fighting in the air since World War I. And you could even say we've been fighting in space since the first Gulf War, when we had satellites in space, GPS satellites, transmitting down location so that we could cross the uncrossable desert into Iraq. Iraqis barely defended their western flank because they can never cross that desert. They'll never be able to navigate, right? They didn't know we had GPS. So we've been fighting in space since 1991. We've been fighting in cyber since 2007, when Estonia was attacked by Russia in a cyber attack because they moved a statue of a Russian soldier from the center of the city of Tallinn to a cemetery. And right now we're in an information war with Russia. You could say we've been in this information war since the presidential election of 2016, when President Putin did not want Hillary Clinton to win because Hillary Clinton called him a tyrant in, I think it was in 2011, after his election. And you could say we are in an information war right now. If information war is just another domain of warfare, then we are at war with Russia right now. We're already fighting World War III.
It is a softer war than air, sea, or land, assuredly.
Is it? So let me ask you this.
Yeah, I think one would maybe lead to the other. It would be a precursor to it, but it wouldn't be the same thing.
Let's talk about effectors. Let's talk about effectors. When you buy a drill, do you buy a drill because you want a drill, or do you buy a drill because you want a hole?
I buy a drill because I'd like a hole, yes.
Okay, so that drill has affected that whatever you're putting the hole in, that wall or whatever, right?
Sure, yeah.
So if you want to destroy a bridge, do you want to destroy a bridge, or do you want to deny your adversary the ability to use that bridge? What do you want to do? What is the effect?
I follow your metaphor, yes.
All right, so if you have something like TikTok and you can organize people and you can say to those people, go stand on this bridge and shut down the bridge for Palestine, what do you have? You have a weapon system. You have a weapon system that has shut down that bridge just as effectively as a weapon. It is an effector.
Yes.
It is an effector.
Yes. I think yes. We can talk about TikTok. We can certainly talk about TikTok if you want.
To go to Russia, to look at Russia's point, if Russia is influencing people in the U.S. to the point where they can become a weapon system that can use either the power of the ballot to vote down policy, or even the power to do something like shut down Congress by calling them, that is a weapon system. We are at war, just in a different domain. And Russia is using these as effectors.
I've certainly heard that argument, and I don't think that I have any evidence to say that it is incorrect. And I know that you spend a lot more time on this, both professionally and in your media career, talking about it. And you want to? I'll just kind of leave it there, because I think if we wanted to get further into it, I think that it tends to get very thorny on my side, because my job is to follow the through lines of politics, which if the populace was as easily programmed as I think people tend to believe that they are when you get very cynical about politics, that, okay, well, people believe this because they watch this channel or they listen to this thing. Yes, assuredly, there is a discourse that happens. And one of the things that is real in our modern world is that we are increasingly paying attention to fewer and fewer common facts. We are paying attention to divergent paths. And that has, in my opinion, the most to do with just the way that our media is splintered more than anything else. And effectively trying to move opinion is more complicated and difficult than it ever has been on a mass scale. Now, on a minor scale, I think you're absolutely right. It's way easier too. If you wanted to really just Manchurian candidate somebody and then parade them through all of the podcasts that would affect that you are talking to the people that you really want to get through to, it's easier to do that now than it ever has been before, when you would have had to go through 5 or 6 booking agents at the 5 or 6 television shows that matter in the world. Now that is a lot more diffuse, and so you can talk to segments of our audience, of our larger audience, easier. Moving the mass, the body populace, I think is incredibly difficult, and that's always where I've hit a wall with any of the misinformation stuff, and it's why I like your misinformation reporting specifically, because you tend to focus on very specific, provable or improvable, like, is this dying child from Gaza, or like, is there a is this video specifically right? And then you show your work on whether or not it is or is not. That's the kind of misinformation stuff that I very much cotton to. While the big picture stuff, I don't think it is provable or improvable. How much it's working. I don't doubt that Russia and China are pushing for it, in the same way that I think it would probably be military malpractice if the United States wasn't looking to sow their narratives around the world in the same way.
We definitely try to sow narratives with things like Voice of America. And for a lot of people, that's the only real news they get, right? There's state media and there's Voice of America.
So there you go. That's my misinformation thought, and I guess I wonder if there's anything else that you see from the side of the military industrial complex idea that is just, we're just in a very militarily skeptical place now, or if you view the Iraq war as kind of this moment where politics changed on it.
I don't know. I can tell you that one of the things that people like to talk about is KBR and Halliburton. It was really just a cash grab for KBR and Halliburton. Well, what do KBR and Halliburton do? They do oil field contracts. They set up man camps. So if you're going to hire a company to come in and set up entire forward operating bases filled with living trailers and shower trailers and kitchen trailers and so on, who are you going to hire? Probably the company that's done it before, right? So I don't know. When you look at the actual graph of military spending, of course there is a bump during that time period, but that was a really weird time in American life where we had just been attacked, and I was in the military at the time, and I was ready to go. Let's go to war. I don't care with who. Just pick somebody. Let's go. Right? Yeah. Let's go. And at that time, we were looking at everything going, we're just going to rid the world of these evildoers, right? For right or wrong, we're going to rid the world of evildoers. So I don't know how much...
uproot jihadist thought in a way that had affected America.
That's correct. And whether that was right or wrong, well, Iraq probably is a better place now than it was under Saddam, and it's kind of sort of a democracy, a little, like it's Afghanistan,
democratic, maybe in Iraq, light democracy.
One of the things I saw some footage from Iraq a couple of weeks ago of Baghdad and people walking around. There's cafes, and I'm like, I once spoke with this Iraqi marshal who said, Ryan, I hope you can come back here on vacation one day. I'm like, dude, I hope I can too. Iraqis are hardworking people. Afghans, they kind of like the year 700, and there's not a lot we could do about that. And we tried introducing Jeffersonian democracy, and they're like, I kind of like this other thing better.
Yeah.
And we held it for 20 years. That was something. But again, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not that deep of a thinker when it comes to policy.
Yeah. All right. Well, I didn't want to let you go without getting your thoughts on Gaza specifically. The Biden administration put forth a peace plan last week, and it seems to me, as somebody who just I am a citizen observer of this. I am not a deep thinker or studied person, but it seems to me exactly the same plan and deal that they had a few weeks ago. But now Biden's put his name on it for some reason. They couldn't get a deal back then. Who knows whether or not they'll be able to get a deal now? It seems curious to me that the State Department continues to beg for Hamas and Riyadh, Saudi Arabia to be making decisions here, as opposed to the United States leading things from any position of strength. But two questions. Number one, what are your thoughts on the deal? And number two, what is the state of play now from your point of view on Hamas in Rafah? What are they currently? And you can answer either of those in whatever order.
So I think that's the peace deal is a little more of a political question than I'm normally used to answering. But I can say that I don't think there is any deal until hostages are released. And I know that some of what Benjamin Netanyahu has done while in office, just personally when it comes to corruption, it's almost like he's trying to figure out a way to extricate himself from this war, but also kind of remain out of jail.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the longer this war goes on, the more he and his political party benefit from this. And that I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I think that's a guy who's I don't know. Did you ever watch the movie Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler, where it's almost like he's that dude from Uncut Gems trying to.
He's doubling down. This will be the one. This will be the one.
Yeah, that's kind of the best way to put it. Where you're going like, wow, okay, you really are doing that. Now the second question, what's the status? There's probably about 4 to 5 battalions of Hamas remaining inside Rafah. And one of the things Israel has done, and it's kind of weird to me because they weren't using America's clear hold build strategy. They were almost using the same strategy we used in Vietnam, where they would occupy an area and then leave, and the insurgents would come back and they would do something they call mow the grass. And
Gotcha.
that's kind of a horrible term when you think about it. And you're also, there is a psychological cost to a soldier when you're taking the same ground that you just gave up a couple of weeks ago, right? And your buddy died over there, and now you're taking it again. So right now there's maybe 4 or 5 battalions of Hamas left in Rafah. There's some scattered remnants, and it's not just Hamas. There's also Islamic Jihad. There's about 10 organizations inside of Gaza, and you also have criminal gangs. And the gangs actually scare me more than Hamas, because one of my big fears is that as the noose kind of closes around Hamas, there's going to be infighting where criminal gangs and other anti-Israeli organizations will attack Hamas to get their own hostages because they want to get out of jail free.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And that's a very dangerous situation for the hostages at that point. Because you're going to have Hamas fighting Islamic Jihad over what hostages remain. And as, it's horrible to say, as more of these hostages die in that fighting or even from Israeli bombing, as more hostages die, they become more valuable. So now they become more valuable to go after. Because now you need that get out of jail free card, because you do not want to be the guy without a chair when the music stops. Or you don't want to be the organization without a hostage when the music stops. Right? And the music's going to stop.
That is going to be the bargaining chip for which you can survive and your operation can survive.
Well, I think that was the whole idea behind the October 7th attacks. Gilad Shalit, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. I can't speak Hebrew that well. But back in, I can't remember. I want to say 2009, I think, maybe 2011. There was this Israeli soldier who was captured.
The big hostage deal, Netanyahu's hostage deal that let out Sinwar.
Yeah, and the Gilad Shalit, I think he was in prison or in Hamas custody for about 4 or 5 years or so. And I think these guys went, Mahmoud Abbas is 88 some years old. Not a lot left on the actuarial tables at 88. So if we enter Israel, we grab a bunch of hostages. We'll parcel those hostages out, 1, 2, 3, every couple of months. Israel will do some raids. We'll kill some of them. They'll kill some of us. They'll get egg on their face. They'll fail to rescue hostages. Maybe they'll get a couple of them, but not all of them. And then when Mahmoud Abbas finally dies, they say to Israel, hey, we're going to give you back all of the hostages, but you need to put us in charge in the West Bank.
Yeah.
That's the plan, right? And Israel, instead of following along, they took a sledgehammer and hit Hamas in the face.
Yeah.
And that was not part of the plan.
No.
So I think the kind of the end game here is that Hamas will be defeated, or they will be attrited to the point where they will not be able to conduct major operations. There will be a 1-kilometer border around Gaza, between Egypt and Gaza and between Israel and Gaza. I don't know who runs that 1-kilometer section between Egypt and Gaza, but Israel is not letting anything through tunnels ever again. And the Egyptians weren't doing that great of a job keeping stuff out. So at some point, maybe we have a foreign force like the MFO, the Multinational Force and Observers, take over that area, and they can find tunnels or stop this stuff from going on. But yeah, once Hamas is attrited to a certain point, then I think Israel they'll kind of suspend operations, they'll move back, and we can start into some sort of rebuilding phase.
Do you believe that this ends without, like Sinwar is the head of Hamas in Gaza? Do you believe that this ends without there being some kind of capture or kill of him or other top people within Hamas?
They will get him. That the electromagnetic spectrum right now within Gaza is like you couldn't pay me to launch a drone in Gaza right now. If you're getting orders from anybody, these orders are going to be done by courier. So we need to. Eventually, they will find this guy, or he will die anonymously in a collapsed tunnel.
Yeah,
that can happen as well. Sometimes we don't get to see the end of the story. Right? But it's the end of the road for Hamas. They got maybe a couple of weeks left.
And yeah, because I totally agree with you that there's a lot going on here in terms of the Israeli side. Netanyahu now facing whether or not his government's going to collapse. The far right elements of his coalition are absolutely against any kind of negotiated peace deal. The left side is threatening to collapse the government from the other position. He does face legal ramifications when he is no longer prime minister. It seems like elections, at least for them, would be on the closer side of as opposed to the farther side. And yet throughout all of this, you do seem to continue to have a consensus amongst the Israeli people, not on the hostages, but rather that Hamas needs to be effectively ended. The question is exactly what that means. And I think from an American perspective, and this is where I would blame the Biden administration, is that there doesn't seem to be any clear idea of exactly what that is. And, you have John Kirby out on the Sunday shows yesterday saying, well, Hamas isn't going to be able to launch any kind of attack. And it's like, but now... Yeah, I don't know. And whether it's Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, whatever emerges, if Gaza's rebuilt and the example is even after October 7th, Hamas wasn't able to be uprooted, then, life is long in the Middle East. Memories are really, really long. I don't think that much will have necessarily been achieved beyond all of the death and destruction that's happened over the past few months.
Yeah, the long term is made up of a lot of short terms, right? And if you can attrit Hamas to the point where they can't conduct short term operations against Israel, then that might be good enough. And then that is most likely just weeks away. Where they
you don't think we're there now?
I don't believe that we're there now. There's still an element inside of Rafah, and Israel they can't they can't use the kind of weapon systems in Rafah that they used in the north and in the middle of Gaza, because there's essentially nowhere else for people to go. They did kind of push people out into there's some farm fields to the west of Khan Yunis, and there's some farm fields to the southeast of Rafah. Again, I'm doing this from memory. But they've kind of pushed people there. I think there's about 250,000 in each side, maybe. But it's still, any kind of operation inside Rafah is going to be, it's like Lawrence of Arabia said, learning how to eat soup with a knife. It's going to be really dangerous and messy because you can't use as many weapons there just because of the civilian population. So I don't think we're there quite yet, and there will be some cells operating inside the middle of the country and inside the north of the country, and inside the north of Gaza. But I don't quite think we're there yet. They need about probably another 4 to 8 weeks of operations to be completely done.
The last time that you were on the show when we talked about this, you mentioned that the goal for Israel would be to either kill or identify everybody that was a part of Hamas. Where do you think Israel is in that goal?
They've gotten probably about 80%, roughly. They were able to attrit Hamas from 5 brigades to 1 understrength brigade. So they are pretty much at that goal. I was actually kind of surprised that they were not getting biometrics off of people as they were sending them away or through checkpoints. But I guess that would have created a humanitarian issue or created a large soft target, because if you have people bunching up at checkpoints so you can grab their biometric data, that would be an ideal place for Hamas to attack and then blame the Israelis, right? So I can see why they didn't do that. I thought for sure they would do that. That wasn't really something that they did. And biometric, actually, I've advocated for the creation of either a Tahrir militia or what I call Sons of Palestine, where you have people who are in the biometric database that are not criminals. Israel's never identified them as a criminal. You say, hey, here's a gun, here's 2 weeks of training. Let's go fight on our side, and then you'll become part of the ruling party when this is all over with. To me, that worked with the Sons of Iraq in Iraq. People say Israel is in Iraq. But again, I still think that's a good idea, because the people... remember a couple of months ago when we had to bomb some Iranian sites in Syria, and President Biden telegraphed that we're going to do that? Why did we do that? We didn't necessarily do that to let the Iranians move their stuff. We did it because we get good signals intelligence, right? Because people go, oh my God, Ahmed, they know where the warehouse is. Do you have any warehouse space open? So we're getting signals intelligence from that. And the only way an insurgency can survive is if all of the people around that insurgency are complicit. So when we see people know there's weapons in that warehouse. So when we see a bunch of people leave an area, we go, there's a warehouse right there. So that's why we telegraphed that strike. And that's why it's important to have Palestinians on the Israeli side, because they know, there's a tunnel over here. So, but I can't tell Israel to fight their war. They're gonna do what they want to do.
It's talk about I think the one uniting element of both of the conversations that we've had today is that you've got incredibly interesting and complex subjects, and certainly military funding, technology, and everything that goes around that is something that is endlessly fascinating. You spend a lot of time talking about it in your various outlets. Similarly with this war, it is to me very, very interesting, and the one thing that the AJAC community that has surrounded it has really, really, really intensely moved it to be something far more simplistic, and I think not only less interesting from a very, very broad perspective, but I think dehumanizing for the real situation that's there, which is incredibly complex and incredibly sad. There's a lot of loss of life that is happening there that I think deserves a fuller explanation of a war between Israel and Hamas. Like that's what's happening right now, and until we fully understand it, and I'm glad that you've come on and helped to fill out my knowledge base on it. I don't think that we can really even understand the loss unless we understand the conflict.
Yeah, one of the things that I've never done is I've never said the word Pollywood. It's actually the first time I've ever said that word, Pollywood. And one of the things that you see sometimes is you see a lot of blatant propaganda coming out of Gaza. And I don't know if you've seen those red triangles pointing to things like tanks. One of the things that you see is you'll have Palestinians show footage of guys shooting rockets at tanks, and then they'll stop when the explosion happens. And you don't actually see the tank burning. What you just saw was the rocket was detonated by the active protection system. There was no hard kill on that vehicle. There have been, my God, hundreds, thousands of pictures out of Ukraine. And I've yet to see a single picture of a genuinely, honest-to-God destroyed. I've seen one Israeli APC, I think it was a Namur, that was genuinely destroyed, like catastrophic kill. But you see what people call Pollywood, and I've always I do not like that term because I think it's very dismissive. You know, if you are a content creator. There are a lot of jobs in Gaza, right? And so if you know Adobe Premiere Pro and you got a job working for Hamas and they're paying you money saying like, hey, take this footage, splice it into a reel, we need to put it up. Well, it's a job.
Yeah.
Not a lot of jobs there.
Yeah.
Not a lot of jobs in Gaza. What are you going to do? And I've never liked that term Pollywood because I think it really takes the living conditions that most Gazans are under and kind of turns them into a joke. And it's not a joke. It's a bad situation. And maybe once we can get Hamas destroyed, then we can start resolving that situation. And I think Gaza could be a paradise. These people are making rocket fuel out of sugar and fertilizer. Let's get them working for Apple. There's some good engineers here, right? They take a water pipe and turn it into a missile. Shoot, let's get them working for Microsoft.
I've only been to Israel once. It reminded me very much. I knew now, as someone who grew up in South Florida, why so many Israelis end up in South Florida because it is an extraordinarily similar landscape. But I could only imagine, especially some of those areas of Gaza have to be. I mean, they're literally right next to it, so it would be something that very much could be a tourist destination. All right, Ryan McBeth, please find him on YouTube, find him on Substack. He is always a delight to have on the show. What else do you have in the pipeline there, Ryan?
Oh my God, what else do I have in the pipeline? I have a video about how we are in World War III right now, whether you like it or not, which I kind of touched on.
You gave us a little preview.
Give you a preview there. I also have a video coming out about why we still have spy planes when we have satellites. Like, why do we have intelligence collection planes? That's going to be coming down the pike pretty darn soon. And there is another video that what's interesting is I don't know whether I can do this video yet because there was sort of another component to it. But I had made a video about this journalist in Russia called Real Reporter. And this particular guy is kind of acting as a mouthpiece for what's called normalization with Russian propaganda, where they kind of show life in Russia. We're gonna show normalization. I think like Anna in Russia is sort of like that. And I made a video about how he was climbing on tanks in Moscow, and he said some things that weren't entirely true about these vehicles. And he made a response video to my video. And I was like, oh my! And I am so happy he did that because we got so much telemetry off that. Like, I didn't think the guy was gonna do that. But, oh, my God. So what did we just do? We got inside their OODA loop, the observe, orient, act, decide. We got inside their OODA loop. So we forced these guys to stop what they were doing, to stop making propaganda for a number of weeks and make a new video. I don't know if you remember the old General Grant saying, like, I want you to stop, I want everyone to stop talking about what General Lee's going to do. I want General Lee worried about what we're going to do. Well, for the first time ever, we got inside a Russian propaganda OODA loop. And we forced them to react to us.
Look at that.
And it was great. And then with people commenting on that particular video, and then people coming to my video and commenting on it, we're able to draw different connections and figure out from everything from what time they were posting to the language that they're using, just by using AI to kind of figure that out. And we can figure out networks from there. I mean, it's beautiful. And some of them use Patreon to I actually can't talk about that because that could turn into a
larger thing.
A larger thing if Americans were contributing through Patreon to this particular internet, to this particular guy in Russia. But that's kind of out of my hands. But I can't believe they walked right into it. They walked right into the trap, and
it shows you that even at high level state funded misinformation campaigns, the immutable XKCD rule of "honey, I can't go to sleep, somebody's wrong on the internet" remains undefeated. Thank you very much, Ryan, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you so much, Justin.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio here in Austin, Texas. If you want to email me, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Find, follow, share clips of this show. TikTok, Justin R. Young. Instagram, Justin R. Young. The big thing is YouTube. YouTube is where the full podcast is presented in video. All of it. Every single inch of it. In video for you. We used to be audio only. We are not anymore. I asked you guys to write in and let me know what you thought I looked like in audio and what I looked like when you saw me on video. And that's why we're asking you to go to youtube.com/@politics to let us know, or let me know, what I actually look like. I got a few of them. Eddie Vedder, very interesting. Oh, hi, oh, I'm still alive. Eddie Vedder is what my voice sounded like. Charlie Day, apparently, my voice sounds like, which I have gotten that a lot. I've gotten a lot of Charlie. And then I got just this one. Straight up, your soul patch threw me for a loop. Great mustache, though, 10 out of 10. I'm going to ask you guys this, though, because it's important. You need to comment on the YouTube. All right? So go to the YouTube, youtube.com/@politics, and comment on whether or not you think we should cover the salacious elements of the Hunter Biden trial more or less. Is it a distraction? Is it relevant? Is it the kind of nonsense that we cover on this show explicitly? Give me your thoughts, because I want to get your sense of this. I want to shape this coverage for you guys, but you got to go to the YouTube, youtube.com/@politics. Comment on this particular video so I can find it all. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And by the way, while you're there, like and subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell for notifications, because I'm putting up stuff that isn't in the podcast. Specifically, clips from my stream. There was a big article on Joe Biden's mental decline in the Wall Street Journal. I read through all of it and broke it down from my reporter perspective. So if you like the journalism deep dives, that's on the YouTube too. youtube.com/@politics. Of course, if you want me on Twitter, I'm Justin R. Young. Share the audio podcast with your friends, family, and clergy. px3podcast.com. You want to hit me off with a one-time donation? You can do so on PayPal if you got a little sitting in there. PayPal.me/PayJury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. And thank you to Gwarthok. Gwarthok hit me with the slick 50. Oh, thank you. Bless you, Gwarthok. You always love, man. You're just walking down the street. Imagine a dude just blessing you with the quick 50. I was on Cloud 9 all day. Hit me up on Cash App, PX3Cash. And if you'd like to send me anything in the mail, it is P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas, 78715. Of course, you can only get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus podcasts per week covering the news that we missed on our free podcasting schedule. And our $10 tier gets your name right at the end of the show like these fine folks in our Titanic. $10 tier. Sugar Brady, Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, Invoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order, Brian, Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checker, Severgini, Matthew, Dr. G, Shad, Bob, Chill, Dustin, Brad, D. Laser, Nick, Just Another Pilot, Middle-Aged Mike, Utah Jimmy Montana, The Jen, Alo, D. Reilly, Andrew, Lisa, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Devon the CFP, Gloria, Gray Zone, Peapod, Jay, Neil, John, DP4 Bongo, Neil, His Nerdiness Charles, Audrey Stole Adler's Spot, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Berkeley Steven, Nomadic Terran, Molly's Delightful Demeanor, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, and Bluefront and the Lenina. You want to be on their level. You want to have your name right at the end of this show. Only one place to do it. Guys, only one place. Take politics seriously. That's it for us this week. We got another week of great shows. We're going to put a little elbow grease into debate prep. Oh, yeah, we're close enough now that we can talk about debate prep. I got some thoughts. I got some strats for both of these candidates. Either are going to listen to them because they're old. Old men don't usually listen to anybody. But for you guys, I will give you my tale of the tape. How I think either can really make this a campaign-turning event. That will be next week. Till then, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics, but this is the only show that dares discuss all three.